Oh,
Okay, red
all right,
roll.
okay.
Thank you.
Hello. Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Sandra King, and I am the Reconciliation Action Plan Coordinator for the Anglican Church of Southern Queensland. And thank you for coming today and, well, this evening, and also staying in tune, or if you're online. Hello to everyone. Tonight is a special night, and I felt it was important to know what's happening with the treaty, and also because it's the 50th anniversary for the Tent Embassy in Canberra. But before I start, I'd like to do acknowledgement to country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians, the Yagara people. I'd like to acknowledge their ancestors and their elders who have held on to their traditions through hardships that they have gone through. It's been a pretty hard few years of settlement, and through those hardships they're able to maintain whatever they can with regards to their traditions and have passed it on. I'd like to also acknowledge the elders here today, and everyone. I'd like to pay my respects to you and everyone here today. And I am a Quandamooka and Bunjalung woman, and I know that my mum and dad are watching me right now with pride. So hi there, mum. Hi there, dad. Tonight, I'd like to introduce you to two amazing women who I love dearly and who I have so much respect for. First is Jackie Huggins, and she's a doctor, and she is a Bidjara and Birragubba Juru woman, and she's on my left, and on my right is Cheryl Buchanan, and Cheryl is a Gomu and Gamilaroi woman. I must say that I do have a stutter, and sometimes it is hard for a black fella to say black fella's traditional names, and I can't get my tongue around it, so sometimes it is difficult. But today I'd like to thank everyone who helped out in putting this together, and I hope you're going to enjoy the conversations today that we're going to have. First off, as we are aware, Queensland now has set aside to look at having a treaty here within Queensland. Jackie, you were very much involved with that from the beginning with the talks. Could you explain why is treaty important, or is it important when it comes to sovereignty? There's a lot of issues with regards whether we do need a treaty or not. So I'd like to have hand it over to Jackie to be able to let you all know what her role is with regards to this.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Sandra, and Wadamuli in my father's language in North Queensland. I just want to say thank you all for coming out on such a cold night. You know, it's really good, but I guess it shows your the interest that you have and the commitment as well to hearing a bit more. I guess I've been involved since 2018 on the treaty process. Cheryl actually was also with me along the way in terms of trying to develop the next steps for what might happen with treaty. We had, in the early stages, we had an eminent panel and a treaty working group. And just more recently, we've had a treaty advancement committee. And right now, there are expressions of interest that have gone out. They have closed on the 18th, I think, to get 7 more members on a 10-member panel for taking the treaty to the next stage of the treaty arrangements. Now, many of you may not be aware that Australia is the only Commonwealth country has never ceded a treaty with its original inhabitants at all. There are treaties in the States, in the Americas, in New Zealand and Canada. So we're a long way, but treaty is not a new thing that our people have been crying out for. There's a lot of things, really. And with the last arrangements, Ken White, the minister, said he didn't want to see a national treaty because he would leave it to the states and territories to do their own. And in the way, it's worked in our favour, I think, because we have gone along with it. There have been treaty processes in Victoria, who's about 2 years ahead of us. They have a Truth Commission as well, of which our treaty process wants to have up and running, let's hope, very shortly as well. There's been talks in the Northern Territory also, and now change of government, South Australia are now going to look at treaty arrangements, as will Tasmania. So it's all happening. West Australia and New South Wales, strangely, sort of just dragging the chain on that. We haven't heard anything more from them. But 2 budgets ago, we received some whopping resources to conduct the treaty and look at a truth-telling mechanism as well. With governments very slow to act and they need some prompting sometimes in terms of getting the ball rolling with, budgets and bureaucracy and so forth. But they're actually come on board now, and hopefully that treaty committee, it's called an independent interim board, and it's supposed to be separate from government, independent in its fullest extent. It will be housed in the State Library of Queensland, of which Cheryl's a board member there now, so I know she'll keep an eye on it for us. And we needed, but it's very sad to see that we don't have any organisations ourselves of which we could have housed that here in Brisbane. But hopefully, when things get going and the funds get dished out the door, we would hope that there would be some way in which we will have our own building, even perhaps a building or somewhere where that treaty process can be rolled out. With the interim board that's being established, I know that it will be based on a regional. It won't be all southeast Queensland, as it has been in the past. So hopefully there'll be a regional spread from the Torres Strait right down through, right down to the border and all in between and out west, of course, because quite often, as Cheryl will tell you, the southwest gets terribly neglected in terms of the work that we have to do. But she and I are from the southwest. My mother's country is Carnarvon Gorge, Springsure, and she was sent to Cherbourg in the 1920s on the back of a cattle truck. And people kind of flinch when I say that, but it is all around our truth-telling, and we have to speak the truths here. So she was put on Cherbourg, and my father's from Ayr, North Queensland, POW, World War II at the Burma Railway. And he was a free man because he was never under the Act at all. which was a good thing. But he died at the age of 38 from war injuries. I was just 2 years of age when that occurred. So all this stuff relates to treaty, and when we did our consultations in between COVID, the 1919 and 2020, 2019, it felt like that, and 2020 and 2021, in between the COVID stuff, there were two things that our people told us were really imperative to treaty, and they did not want that to go away. And the first thing was to do truth, to do a truth-telling exercise, before all else, because you need truth before treaty, they said to us. And also that we're sovereign people, and our sovereignty was never ceded, and they wanted that to be very explicit. And so we put it on the front page of our report. If you want to look at these documents, they're at, because they were housed originally in DATSIP, Department of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships. You can go to the website there because they're fully, we're coming up to our third report, which I hope will be given mid-August at Parliament House, and that will carry on the work for the IIB to two main things: to establish a treaty institute, and the other one is a mechanism for truth-telling. But the Treaty Institute has to prepare our groups and government to become treaty ready. We know that there are a couple of groups now, and including my own country now, I can honestly say that may be treaty ready to take up, to have a look at what treaties might look like. Now, when you say treaty or treaties, we're hearing that our mob are saying we want treaties between ourselves first before we go to the state or to the government, and that can be achieved. This is all under the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People, of which I acknowledge Les Melzer in the audience, who slogged away for 20 years, Les, to pass that through the ups and downs, and we finally got it through, and it was a great day when that happened. But that is a cornerstone of why treaty is important. You might have heard that there's this thing called Voice Treaty Truth, which is attached to the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We can talk about that a little later, because we can certainly have some discussion around that. But there's still very much a long way to go with that. But we would hope that government would now process the next steps of treaty through that independent interim committee. So that's really what's happening at present. Nothing much more to report, except it is huge. It's a work in progress, and it will continue to be driven, hopefully, by our people. And but the danger is, of course, in terms of keeping it outside government as much as we can. And Cheryl and I and others, we've always been staunch from the time we got on those committees to say that no, that we are independent. We refuse to have our meetings in the first ones in the government, in government offices, because of the perception from our people about who's driving this. So it's, for the next committee, that will be a challenge too. It'll be a great challenge for those people to bring on board everybody too, because I'm not quite sure. I've got to find out. I always say 97% and 3, but Queensland, it's a little bit different. We're a little bit higher in terms of our stakes, it might be 7%. Not sure, I should find that out and let you know. But yeah, I'll leave it there, Madam Chair, and we can talk more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Cheryl, I wanted to get your views on treaty because I'm sure you might have a few. I don't know, really. Do you have?
Absolutely none. Absolutely none. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this country, the Jagera people, and to all of you who've come, thank you so much. I like these nice, quiet, intimate groups. I think that it's usually people who are really committed, who are wanting to understand, who want knowledge, and who want to learn. And so Jackie and I love that challenge, always. Acknowledge you, Les, in the room, Ravina, my old friend, my old mate from Woodford there, old brother there. I saw him down Nambucca Heads when he was young. He don't remember me, though. I was probably a third the size, that's why. But anyway, I guess I'll try and break things down a bit. You know, why do we need a treaty? Why is it important to have a treaty? Well, if you look at the history, that's the first place you start. And one of the things that happens is that as soon as you start mentioning history in the context of blackfellas, people go, yeah, well, you know, I didn't rape anyone. I wasn't there when the massacres happened. I didn't shoot people. You know, that happened a long, long time ago. Yes, a lot of those things did happen. But what happened was that our lands were stolen. Our languages were stolen. We are survivors of massacres. Any blackfella that you look at, any of us, we are survivors of massacres. That's who we are. You can pretend that you're something else, as a lot of blackfellas try and do now, but it's not the truth. That's where you start. That's your starting point. So during this, you have to ask, what's required of me as an individual? What's required of us? People talk about truth-telling, but what does it actually mean? People want to be able to get up and tell a story, and we were told that when we went around Queensland and did the consultation. I was in the Treaty Working Group. Everybody said the truth must be told. That was blackfellas and whitefellas saying that. How you do that, how you create a safe space though, and a place where people feel comfortable to be able to tell their stories. And a lot more people are coming forward now, especially a lot of whitefellas, saying, you know, these are the stories from my family, from our history that were never ever talked about, but we want to talk about them. And a lot of them want to talk about them for this very reason. They know that they have benefited from our oppression. They have got privileges from our oppression. And, you know, Arlene Morton Robertson, the academic, talks about white privilege all the time. And it's a very important thing to understand, because I would say that it's probably only maybe 2 generations of our people who ever even owned a house, went to university. So here we are, what, 250 years, is it? Along, you know, since colonisation, and we're still right up there as very underprivileged. In terms of statistics, you know, I would love to get up to date. I'm a bit like Jackie, because I think statistically, I remember when we first started, you know, late 60s, early 70s, we had the highest infant mortality rate in the world then. Everything, we were one of the highest of everything that was going. Incarceration rates. Now we have one of the highest female incarceration rates in the world. Aboriginal women, young women, beautiful young women. The suicides that are going on within our community are not being reported, mostly, as suicides. I buried a 40-year-old niece last Thursday, a 36-year-old nephew, only in February. You know, these suicides that are happening, you saw the stuff on Cherbourg, reported in Cherbourg. Did everybody read that? I think they had something like 10 suicides, wasn't it, Jackie and Sandra, in 2 weeks or some crazy thing. In the Brisbane community, you know, I don't live here, but I can tell you that my son was going to a funeral nearly every day and, you know, doing the cultural business for suicides, for kids he grew up with, he knew, his family. And these are the things that need to be addressed. They're not easy things. You know, make you feel uncomfortable, make you like, oh, gee, that's not really good. But these are things that have to be. So one of the things is, yes, you can tell your story, and I encourage everyone to tell their story, but also there's got to be accountability. Okay, you know, I'll be saying this to the white fellas. Your mum and dad, you know, they may not have shot people, but you have benefited from your grandparents and your great-grandparents. What have you done about it? What have you done about it to take on board humanity, compassion, love, those important things that actually make the world go round and that keep most of us getting up every day? And if your answer is, well, I don't really know, I don't really do much, haven't done much, I don't know anything, you've still got people who say they've never met a black fella. I mean, it's absurd, some of the things that you hear along the way. So it's about leadership as well. It's about, through this process, I would hope that there emerges some amazing people from all walks of life. You know, First Nation people, people who've come from migrant backgrounds, people who've come from all different kinds of backgrounds. We need leadership right throughout the community. People who've got the guts to come on board and go, you know, I'll be there, I want to be counted. That's what it's going to require. And it's going to require, you know, we talk about reconciliation, but it's going to require statesmanship as well, or stateswomanship. So something much more than, I believe that we need land and we need water and we need this and we want housing, we want something else. It's going to require things much more than that. And I think that whenever I've been thinking about it, since we did the Treaty Working Group report, you know, I think about people like Nelson Mandela. You have to have a look at that and go, there is a man who was imprisoned, you know, they tried to break his spirit, they tried to break everything in him, but he came through it, you know. There's a lot of amazing people. We see that too within our own people. As we travel, there were some amazing people who just want to be heard. And it's not about just being heard. What they said was that, we want to tell the truth and tell our stories. We want it recorded, we want someone to listen, and we want it put into the education system so it becomes compulsory for people to learn to have access to all of these stories, whoever it is. So we need people like the Graces to come on board, to show leadership within this. And that is the only way that this is going to happen. Not one individual is going to solve this. It's going to be slow steps, small steps. We'll all be dead and gone before it probably happens in terms of an actual signing of a treaty. But people have an organisation that I've been involved in, Northern Basin Aboriginal Nations, we have a treaty between the 22 nations who come and meet, based on culture, the cultural respect, and to do with the water issue, water rights. There are examples of things that have happened in the past and in the present that we can look at to help us through this, you know. And don't be afraid of the challenge, because that's what it's going to be. You'll be crying your eyes out one minute and laughing the next, because every one of us is going to have to dig so deep. You know, people always said, oh, God, they always wrote me up as this activist who's angry. Why is she so angry? Why is she so angry? You know? Well, I've got plenty of reasons why I'm angry. But a lot of those you don't talk about. You keep them inside you. A lot of terrible things happened to all of us, all of our people, all of us as communities. You know, during this process, I'll mention something. We used to stay at that, what's that, Elizabeth Street, eh? That hotel, Jackie? Ibis. All these women sleeping in bus shelters, 50, 55. You go up and say, sister, you know, like, and you see them there every night, eh, Jackie? It just heartbreaking. Why in 2022 are people still living in poverty? Why in 2022 are people still having to be ashamed of their identity? You know, if they're gay or lesbian or transgender or ABC, dead, or I can't even think of all the things that now. I always get it all mixed up. Anyway, that's why I don't say it much. But, you know, people have to be, always people questioning about your identity of who you are. There's no other race in the world, though, that's had to prove who they are like we did. Oh, what are you? Oh, you quarter caste. Oh, you half caste. Oh, you 3/4 caste. What caste are you? This is what we used to get when we were kids, you know. I remember when I first came to Brisbane, I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. You know, I really had never ever heard it before, because you didn't have to worry in Cunnamulla. You're either black fella or you're a white fella. You know what I mean? But there's some strange things have happened in this world. And, you know, racism is so institutionalised now that, you know, Jackie talked about who we've got to get on board. There's no point in all of us deadly amazing people like sitting here and all of us like us. You know, we have to get everyone, as many people as we can, on board. But if the government says we're not ready, what's going to happen? Are we going to get on the streets? Are we going to march again? Well, I'll be there, because that might be what it takes. The government has to have a preparedness as well, and this is what I have said, that they need to have something very similar to the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody, where across the board, people at the DG level are made accountable. You put it into their contracts of, you know, what they have to achieve, they'll soon start doing a job that they're supposed to be doing. You can easily get accountability. Don't worry about that. Even if they're not on board, as long as the actions are happening. We need the trade unions again. We need the women. We need everybody. You know, and I think about the campaigns, and we had Charmaine Foley was involved in the Treaty Working Group, you know, involved in the reconciliation process. And, you know, the thing is, if you haven't got the white fellas on board, it's not going to happen. That's what they're saying. I don't agree with that. I think we need to have everybody on board. But if black fellas can see that this process is skewed, people will take to the streets. People will be loud, they will be vocal. because I think everyone recognises this. ACS. This is like the last stand. You know, Custer's last stand? For us, this is our last stand. We have tried every possible tool that has been made available. Look, Les there, 20 years, going to the United Nations, being away from country, being away from everyone running him down. You know, this is a sacrifice that people make all along the way. People put up their hand and be counted and suffer the abuse, you know, and everything else as a result of it. But at the end of the day, even if you get close to the goal, yes, we got the UN Declaration. Do they take notice of it, brother? Very, very little, not very often. But you know what? They're only as honest as we allow them to be. If you're going to sit on your buddhas all day doing nothing, that's fine. Nothing will ever happen. So I hope to see you all at some stage down the track. I don't know if I'll be on the treaty committee that's being appointed. Everyone who knows me knows I don't care. Whether I'm on this side or that side, I'm still the same. Nothing's going to change. You know what I mean? I'll still be fighting for our mob. We went on the streets fighting for inalienable freehold title of country. That wasn't just about land, that was about water. We talked about airspace in them days. Airspace. What's happened with that? You know, sea rights, everything under the ground, right down to the core we used to talk about. Where that talk now? Oh, it must be up in the cloud there. We'll have to pull it out of the cloud wherever it got stored somewhere, Jackie. So it's going to be a big, hard fight, people. And we don't have time, not because I'm getting older, but we really don't have time. And I say to people, when we went around, Jackie knows this, you're making us want to give us our sovereignty, give away our rights. Okay, I don't know what rights you think you got. You're living on a mission there, butter, whatever. The department's still telling you what to do, thriving community. But, you don't give up your sovereign rights. That's not what a treaty is about. You don't give that up. But what you can is fight damn hard for a better future, for all our generations to come. And every one of you, we're all responsible for the next 7 generations. And you ask yourself this, not only what's your legacy, what's the legacy of these people in power now, making these decisions to keep the fracking going, keep the mining going, to keep all of this going? They don't care. They don't even care about their own grandchildren. There are some people you have to go, won't be involved with them. We have to be surrounded, all of us, surround ourselves with good, positive people and just go for it. So that I might get a T-shirt, just let's go for it.
Thanks. Yeah, we know, but you talk.
Sandra's giving me the evil eye.
I'm not. Do you think treaty is the answer for us, for a better future?
Look, like native title land rights, nothing is the panacea at all. Not one thing can solve all the issues that we've got to deal with. So, but we take the opportunity when it presents itself and go for that one. Because, Aboriginal affairs, and I think Les was saying 50 years for him, probably 50 for you too, Cheryl, eh? Is it?
Now, it's a bit longer than that.
Oh, is
I'll
it?
share that story with you in a minute. Yeah.
All right, after I'll get that story, yeah. And it's 43 for me. that I really kind of got into this. It's if you can survive Aboriginal affairs and politics, you survive anything. All right, it is really tough. It can be really tough, very rewarding. But it's also about you, you know, you as a person and your family and your communities that you're trying to address these things through. So no, look, I don't believe treaty is a silver bullet by any stroke of the imagination, but it will help. It will help to look at our position of recognition, social justice, and I think it would also go towards creating that healing that is so needed in our country. And I really want to hear Cheryl's story right now, so I'll hand the mic over to her.
Breathe.
I had my first political argument when I was 9 with my uncle, who was a kangaroo shooter in Cunnamulla. And he later became one of the Bilby brothers, Frank Manthe. White man, German. That's where I used to hear the word hun. You, hun, from my auntie. I didn't even know what it meant then. He married mum's sister. But, you know, just chip away, chip away. Then suddenly he became a great advocate of environmental issues. And him and Peter McRae, Uncle Frank largely got the money for the Currawinya National Park fence to keep the bilbies in. He's passed away now, so I'll just give him acknowledgement there. And to my deadly auntie who kept him accountable, because accountability is very important. Now what happened, my mum and dad were, I lived in a very dysfunctional family when I had to go with my mother and father. My grandmother was my stability. When I was with my mother and father, I don't know how many times they broke up, came back together, broke up, came back together. Billy Buchanan, who I call the king of reconciliation, I think we count about 20 schools that we went to. We stopped there. We're trying to work out how many schools we went to. Wherever the work was, in them days, Dad was a white, working class man, had to follow him wherever he went. But then one part when I came down, my auntie captured me, Auntie Phyllis. She's the only one of my aunts still alive. I'm the second eldest of my entire clan, not just my family, my entire clan. So her and Uncle Bob were going to go to Malaya, or Malaysia, I think it was called then. This is in '66. So I came down, went to school, did half of grade 9 and grade 10 at Everton Park High School. Now, I used to wag school, and this is where I met Bob Anderson, because they used to have stuff going on, and I hung around with all different kinds of bohemian-type people, all types of people. But the Trades Hall was a very interesting place in those days, and they used to have great speakers, great orators. Fascinating. Used to fascinate me. I did confess to my aunt about 10 years ago that I used to wag school. She said, Cheryl, what, you think I didn't know that you were wagging school? And, it was like, I felt ripped off because I felt so guilty all of these years, and I finally got the guts to confess to my aunt, because I was getting older. Oh, you already knew that. Yeah, and so, my political life started very early. And, Kath Walker, and I mentioned this the other night, member of a Communist Party, and I got to know quite a few people. And I went away after that, back up to Gladstone to finish school. But I couldn't wait to get to Brisbane, to get to the big smoke and see, see what I could do. And I was just lucky that my family were activists. My Auntie Ada was in Fakatsi, my Auntie Silva was in Fakatsi. Jackie's mum was in Opal. Some great organisations then who, in our young years later on, we called them assimilationist. In fact, they were just trailblazers. They were trailblazers. When you're young, yes, you got all different kinds of ideas and you think you can change the world and change everything. But, Uncle Neville Bonner, I remember arguing with him, calling him Big Uncle Tom. And later on I sat on a committee with him and become so close. I just love that man because he's grandfather to my children, So times change. Things change in your life, And I think it's about having an ability to listen, I don't know at what point in your life that you actually learn how to really listen, to really open up your heart, and to open up your mind and to, open your binners up as well. And I think some people get that early in their life. Some people it takes a little bit longer. But at the end of the day, it's kind of, I've never been on a holiday. I don't know what a holiday is. I fell into everything I did. I call myself organic, right? I fell into everything. I didn't know never knew what I was doing, and just one thing followed on to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. I took it all in my stride up to here, up to coming here tonight. That's what I have done because I let the old spirits guide me. That's how we were brought up. You let the spirits guide you. And if you're good, and you got that good positive energy, them spirits will look after you and they'll guide you. Not that bad things haven't happened to me in my life. Bad things have to happen to you in your life. We all have to have our fair share of traumatic, shocking, terrible things happening to us. And we learn that through our culture as well, You have to have the good and the bad. So hopefully going forward, I think healing, that word, Jackie, that you use, sister, is so beautiful because I think that healing is something that's very important to everybody. Because who is it can put their hand up and say, I love what's happening now with the country. No, we're all complaining. We get up in the morning. We live in houses that are cold. Petrol's dear. You go to the shop, oh, no toilet paper. Someone's, taken all the toilet paper. Where you go and there's nothing on the shelves. There's a lot of rubbish stuff happening right now, right now. But, these are the times I love. I love when you got nothing. Because when you got nothing, that's when you get your fight in you. You get your groove back and you go, they think they can put it over us, Well, no, we're going to show them that they're not. So regardless of whether government comes on board or not, we will push this, we're going to push it forward. You got sisters here, 3 sisters here for a start. We'll push it forward. And that's what we have to do. So I'm going to get a T-shirt now. Treaty, go for it. Okay? I'll start passing around the hat to start. Ravina, you can organise that. See, good leader always delegates.
Thank you, sis. I really appreciate that. Listening to both Jackie and Cheryl means so much to me because I look up to these ladies so much. And Cheryl, I remember us in the marches, and what was happening back then and how things happened. But we'll talk about that after. And but I just got one question that I wanted to know. You spoke about the members, and you're looking for new members. Not that I not want to be one, but I'm just saying, who are they and what qualifications do the government require to be a member? And are there some government officials that are against it? Of course, there probably will be.
Look, I'll probably say that really, well, I know that the regional spread is very important and that you don't overload it with everyone coming from Brisbane. And I agree with that, absolutely, you know, totally agree with it. In terms of the skills base, you cannot just walk off the street and put your hand up for this. It is highly political. You're going to have to be so tough, you know. Experience too comes into it, and I would hope that, you know, there's a few ones like Cheryl and I and Les and you, Ravina, with, you know, that kind of experience, but also that that ability to know, to know community as well. So it's not for the faint-hearted or the naive. I would love to see a lot more younger people, the next generation I call them, because as Cheryl says, it's going to take a long time to get a treaty or treaties in our state here, you know. I'm guessing myself 10 years, and that's being very optimistic. Yeah. I think when they started in the Northern Territory, they were saying it would be 40. So we want people on there that can certainly last the distance and have some idea in their head about succession planning as well, because we all got to do that. You know, a lot of us are very tired, including myself. You know, when you've been doing this stuff 40, 50 years, you will have, you know, you just ain't what you used to be when you're in your 20s and 30s. But, you know, but then again, you know, some people just get better as they get older. And I would expect that gender balance is always important. It will always play a role in terms of the mix of, you know, like you can't have 8 men and 2 women. That ain't going to work. There will be non-Indigenous people on here for the first interim board, and we have to have that, as Cheryl says. You know, we have to have that to mobilise the mob out there a bit more. I would expect out of the 10, possibly 3. Only 3 could we have in that mix. But when the big board comes on, like the permanent board after this, it has to be, and as we've said in our report, Cheryl, it has to be all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander to drive that treaty committee down the track a bit. But right now we need to mobilise everybody. It's a bit like, you know, the old reconciliation days and the people's movement to get everybody on board with this. And I think, and I'm not sure who's going to be doing the selections or the interviews or whatever, but we would hope that they would give, you know, a bit of a mix about, you know, that next generation and people who are very skilled politicos. You know, we can operate in any political context. They're the people too that we need there. If they're not on the committee, then they should be advising outside that. I must say I have not put my hand up for the committee at all. I feel I've done my bit to bring it to this level, but certainly I want to be involved. I want to be involved with the board and with government in terms of trying to, you know, do that work and get people and getting governments to treaty ready. So I'll always be involved. I feel this is one of the things that's at the bookends of my career anyway, which when I retire, and retire, None of us retire really when you're a Murray. So, but when I get close to not wanting to, be totally involved in the process, I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing, but it has to come at your realisation about when you want to step back. And I'm getting a lot better at that and saying no. But it's taken me, 66 years to say no to a lot of stuff. But there is some stuff that's just so important in our communities, we can't let it go and we can't say no. So hopefully, with all that, there will be, I hope, a new set of people who'll be able to drive that treaty process. But I hope they're really good selections, because there's some fantastic mob in our communities, and I just feel, I just want to, for me personally, I want to give others a go and another 10 years, some of those younger ones that'll be on the committee will be so ready for it and so experienced that we will get our justice back in terms of certainly treaty for our people and justice.
Yep. You right, Father?
I just have to make an apology to everyone. I have to go. And I just wanted to thank you, Sandra, for tonight, and everyone who helped out tonight. But I just want to say what a privilege it is to know these two ladies here and to hear what they have to say. A few weeks ago, NAIDOC Week, we went to a function at St John's College at the University, Queensland, and you talk about the young people. There was great hope there, and I think if we can keep having a go, pushing for this treaty, but fostering that hope in the young people, and that's what you can do too. Please push that hope. Thank you very much, ladies. I'm sorry I have to go, but okay. Have a good evening for the rest of it.
Thank you. Listening to what you said, I kind of got disheartened when I heard 40 years or so, but look at what's happened now from, when we were marching and how long that has taken, and we're still struggling. So we are a very patient mob, and as you say, this is our last chance to get it right. And I feel that we need to take that time to make sure that it is right and it suits all of our people who live in urban areas, including who live traditionally as well, and those up in the Torres Strait as well. So it's important to get it right. And the length of time, yes, it's a bit disheartening, but, it has to be done. Now, I just wanted to note, if everybody would like to have a break and have some tea and coffee and cake, there's plenty cake, and then we'll come back and talk about the tent embassy. Would that be okay, or would you like to carry on? Carry on? Carry on? Okay, we'll carry on. Yeah, okay. And look, I didn't say hello to him, but I need to acknowledge Les. He was my boss back at the Department of Aboriginal Islander Affairs back in Charlotte Street, was it? Yeah, and I looked up to you then, and I thought, what an amazing man, have a black fella up there. And then to hear you standing, and sitting in United Nations, I said, here, look, this fella take one big leap and he's overseas. When you strongly believe in what you can do, it's amazing that the impact in changing perceptions of others can do, especially at that top level of the United Nations. So I take my hat off to you and I pay that respect to you. Sorry I didn't acknowledge you beforehand, sorry. And so now we're going to talk about the big anniversary for this year for the tent embassy and the 50 years. And Sis and I, Cheryl and I, went down, and there was it first started in January, straight after on the day of Invasion Day, on the 26th, by the four young fellas. Michael Anderson led it, due to the Yongyu court case, where they lost a court case there. So this is where it has started, where the Tent Embassy started. So I'll hand it over to you and take it from there. So let's go.
So people need to remember that in 1972, there was a whole lot going on, and there was a lot of demonstrations had taken place before that, leading up to that. Some very intense demonstrations in Brisbane here, for example, 71, fighting for land rights, fighting for recognition, black control of black affairs. And I think it was mostly the East Coast. And what we were doing was showing our support for people in the Territory, people in Western Australia. They'd started going out on strike. One of the biggest strikes, I think, happened in 1946 in the Pilbara. That's when blackfellas who were working on properties started going out on strikes. And then you had the Gringy mob, who went out on strike as well at Dugaragu at Wave Hill, Waddy Creek. So it was very timely, and the thing about it is that it's probably one of the longest demonstrations that's ever occurred. I would say 50 years, on and off the Tent Embassy has been going. In those days, people never mentioned Chicka Dixon, but I always like to acknowledge people. Chicka Dixon was in Sydney, and he was like a father to all of us young ones when we used to go down there. And he was on the waterside workers, the wharfie. He was one of the wharfies. And they used to call him the Fox. But he was very politically astute. Very, very smart man, and it was his idea. He was the instigator of those four young fellas going down. Probably not going to read that in many books, but anyway. You read all kinds of things now, like I said the other night. But, the whole idea of it was, as it started to go along, was to try and get in touch with people from all the different embassies in Canberra. So, there's a lot of, every embassy from every country was in Canberra. Now, the work that was done was to get all of those people from the embassies coming down, talking to us down there, and highlighting what was going on right throughout Australia in terms of, fourth world conditions. And so more and more people came, but then the tourists started to come as well. And so it became bigger and bigger and bigger. And Canberra, as the months went on, got colder and colder and colder. So by the time we'd, a lot of people, I was actually part of the embassy staff, so you might see, when they'd stow stuff on the embassy, you'll see me up there with my face. You'll see Sandra's beautiful face too. God, she was a looker. I tell you what, she was a gorgeous looking woman. She's there in that embassy stuff as well. But what happened was that it just became so politicised, so political, such an embarrassment to the government that they wanted to pull it down, because it was just reminding. I mean, we never wanted it to look good. It was always going to be a bit of canvas or a bit of tin, because that's how our people were living. A lot of our people are still living like that now. And so that was the whole idea of it. And so in July, and I won't say the dates because I always get the dates mixed up, so July 72 was the call to arms So everyone jumped in buses. I think we had 3 buses from here. Poor old Auntie Janie Arnold, I remember her. Hope you got that damper there, Auntie, to take down. People jumped on the buses, everyone went down. Oh my God, it was so cold. I remember waking up on the lawns of Canberra at the 10 Embassy. We'd have sleeping on a piece of canvas with canvas over us with ice. It was like you'd wake up and it'd be icy. But you know, when you're young, you don't care. You're invincible. You know, nothing bothers you. And then the university, when everyone came down on the buses for that thing, said that they'd make accommodation. Now, Richard Rafshorgi was the person from the embassy, from the ANU at the time. He later became a politician. Anyway, he was there to give us support. And have you seen the footage of the police marching? You know, people still are horrified when they see that image of the police marching on that group of people, and they were chucking people around, hell, west and crooked. They didn't care. And the victory was that on the 3rd attempt, they tried to take it down. I grabbed this piece of canvas and held it up. And then everyone cottoned on that, oh, the embassy's going back up again, right, on that 3rd day. And we felt so victorious. I can tell you what, we were so elated. It was like, oh my God, we've beat the system, we've beat everything. And from that day forward, I think it did something for the spirit of people. I think it showed people that, no, we weren't going to be intimidated. We weren't going to be giving in to this police force and this government who were trying to take away our rights. And I think from that day on, I think the level remained. And, you know, we had people from the territory as well. What I love about this community, this Brisbane community, and I miss it so much. I put a good 30 years into this community, you know, like every day. And I'm backwards and forwards now. But was that the real militancy, we've got nothing to lose. A lot of people from Cherbourg, Woorabinda, Palm Island, so on, from all of the reserves, ended up coming down here to Brisbane, treated very, very badly, and couldn't understand, you know, the way things worked in Brisbane and this urban centre. And the eastern coast, so it was Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne. That was the militancy, where the militancy was coming from, and that fed into the 10 Embassy and has continued right up until today. And we should be proud of the fact that, you know, there's never been a selfishness, you know, that we were there to fight for whatever was going on, you know, whether it was in Darwin or Perth or wherever it was, and go out in the streets and march. And I think that that kind of pride we can build on. Young people now are hard to get motivated. People always say that. Social media has taken away an ability of what we used to do, which is just sit down and yarn, have a cup of tea. You know, in the community through the 70s, that's how we got people motivated. We'd just go house to house. Someone would make a pot of stew, we'd go around, you know, whatever. And I see more and more that our people are starting to do that again now. I think poverty does something too, you know. When you get really hard up, you go, oh, gee, we really need to start sharing. We need to, you know, I need to go up to my sisters and, you know, all have a feed together because it's easier or whatever. And so, you know, I see some interesting tactics and strategies that could be used for treaty during all of those times. And if it was up to me, I'd be running it like a campaign, like we had a land rights campaign. That's how you run it. That's how you get people involved. You run it like a campaign, and you don't take too much notice of what's going on with government. Because at the end of the day, if you get the people behind you, you don't need the government. The government have to then take notice of what you're saying. That's a position. How do you get people to feel powerful again? How do you get people to feel like they can have a say again? You know, that's a question you need to ask yourselves when you go home and get up in the morning and have the answer for it. And that's what it is. People getting together, people talking, and, you know, getting that sense of unity again. It's there. It's there. We just have to find it, that's all. I was going to make one comment about the treaty stuff. You know, people never ask you this, what's your vision for the future? You know what I've always thought about? And we talk about young people. I think that when I'm dead and gone, there will be this group of these most amazing researchers, young First Nation lawyers, who are going to go to England, Ireland, all of them places. They're going to uncover every piece of paper that is needed to be and have the biggest court case, and we win it. It's going to be revealed of what really happened. We have bits of the story where they say, you know, that when they come over on the boats that they disappeared, they disobeyed their orders, that they were supposed to negotiate with people if they found them here. You know, but it's all about marine law. So I'm not going to live long enough to do all the stuff that I want to do. And if I had about 10 different brains happening at one time, I could probably achieve it. But through marine law, you know, they're under marine law when they come over. So I hope some really smart people, you know, come through this whole process. And then if we have a treaty, you know, they'll have something to hold up as well. And just a closing comment about New Zealand, you know, like, it's only in very recent times that New Zealand has actually been able to negotiate real futures for their people because they had a treaty. It's only in very recent times, and that treaty was signed how long ago? You know, in America, how many treaties are there, Les? Hundreds, all broken treaties. We can learn from all that. We've got enough people around to do research. We can learn from all the broken treaties. But the simpler that you make the language when you're writing things up, the better it is. Make it simple, keep it real, and go for it. My new little thing only just come out with this tonight.
Trudy, go for it. Okay, I've got to get a T-shirt made up for that for you. Okay, then, my memories is, we spoke about, is that the women, we linked arms in Canberra, and yes, it was a shock.
Why did we link arms? Because we were silly enough to think that they wouldn't hurt us. That's how naive.
My biggest fear back then was to be put in the paddy wagon. I made a promise to myself when I was young, when we started marching, that I would never, ever want to be inside of a paddy wagon. And until this day, thank you, Lord, that I haven't seen the inside of a paddy wagon. But, you know, it's through all our marches that we've gone through. I went to the Black Lives Matter March, which is really about Aboriginal deaths in custody. We've just taken that name because America had it. And when I went down to King George Square, I stood in front of one of the statues. And it was during COVID, we all had masks on, and I just stood there and I just looked around King George Square. And I thought, hang on. And I was just looking, and then all of a sudden I had tears. Because never would I have thought that we would have young elders, non-Indigenous ones, families, white families wearing Aboriginal T-shirts, signs, holding the fist up in this day and age. I never thought that would ever happen, to see that. And I just had tears and I was crying, and I thought, and I said, Lord, they're listening. They're listening to our stories. They're hearing us. They're hearing the truth. So it takes a while, but I think we can get there, because we have strong leaders such as yourselves. And going down to Canberra, I think, besides their freedom rides, and William Cooper and Pearl Gibbs, going right back in the beginning of times, when they were started to fight, I think we have done a lot to change people's minds, and we've broken down quite a few barriers. We have a lot of people who are wanting to know and wanting to support us, wanting to support treaty, wanting to support the statement from the heart and from the Heart campaign. This is important for us to have a better future, a future that we hopefully will not be able to be judged anymore, because I'm tired of being judged. And I'm sure everybody, all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, are tired of being judged by their skin colour and also for being Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. It's hard. But with our young ones coming through, I think and learning from yous, and learning from that, what our past has given them the strength, because our elders didn't have a freedom to choose. That is a natural given right, a freedom to choose how to live their life, a freedom to choose to have a career. But they have that freedom now to make that choice. And it's because of people like you that have been in our lives and standing up and being active. And you were talking about going into families' homes. I remember going to your mum's home, Auntie's home. How many people were there? Uncle Bowman, going to his place all the time. There was a lot of people going, just turning up out of the blue, and there was always food there for them, even though they were struggling. Times were tough and we were stronger. Now we need to be even more stronger now. The treaty is important. The Tent Embassy is important because it's given us that strength. So if anybody, if you've got any questions, I'm going to hand the mic over to you. So we just have a few questions. Has anybody got a few questions? Any questions you can ask? Yes, okay, sorry. Maybe I should get up.
Sorry. Hello, my name's Gary, and thank you all very much for what you've done. I acknowledge your skill and wisdom and your long fight. I've probably got a million questions, but I'll stick to one. In about 10 years ago, there was a real movement for constitutional change, and people were going to get ready to vote. And I remember telling my congregation, get ready to be engaged in the vote for the Constitution. And it faded, and the statement from the heart's come for the hope for constitutional vote, and you're talking about treaty rather than statement of the heart is the impression I get. Can you tell me why, short story about why that faded and why now treaties with states seems to be more important than something constitutional. If I'm reading you right, I may not be reading you right.
I don't think there's any hierarchy of importance here. They're all important. And in my opinion, they can all be run at the same time. You know, we hear the Greens saying, no, we must have treaty first, and then we'll do the others. Well, here in Queensland, we have the opportunity to do treaty first. We do, because the voice is so lagging. There has been a committee recently formed, but it's been very slow to take, you know, and people haven't been briefed yet about what that might be. And of course, underlying all that is this whole process of truth-telling, which is, you know, has to be up there as well. I do remember that constitutional exercise that we had. In fact, I think I went to the Constitution Convention that was had, and it kind of fizzled like the summit. What's the name of that? 2020 summit. Remember, that kind of fizzled as well. That was both, I think, were Labor inventions, and I think the Conservative government wanted to see that fizzle anyway, wanted to see it fizzle out. But, you know, I would say right now, whilst there are many things, well, there are those two things really, treaty and Uluru Statement from the Heart and voice, thank you, that are really getting attention. You know, but we have waited so long, so very, very long, generations, decades and 100 years to actually get to the position that we're at. So I'm not sure how the state treaty here in Queensland, or treaties, will align with the federal government. That's not been worked out. Or whether we have a national treaty, who knows? But they're very intent at the moment in putting the voice up there and the voice in the Constitution. And remember, we will have a referendum, folks. It will be ugly. It will be as ugly as the marriage equality. So watch for that, and I'm cautioning everyone that, you know, we'll have all the bigots and the racists come out against us, people who have never met an Aboriginal person but have got plenty of stories about us, you know, this one and that one and that one. I mean, you know, some of my neighbours, I live in that street, but they're kind of cautious of me, I think a bit wary because I tell them a few home truths or whatever. But, you know, come that referendum, and there's a long way to go with that even, because, hey, I don't know the model. I don't know the wording on that as well. And I want to know what I'm voting for here too, just like the rest of yous. Otherwise, I'm not going to vote for it, even though I'm blackfella. And we see some blackfellas coming out now saying, not sure about this. I'm going to say no to this. I'm cautiously optimistic, and I'd love to see that succeed, but there are many, many questions for all of us and for the process that follows those questions, even with treaty as well. But treaty is unlike a referendum. We're not voting on it. It's going to be done. And, you know, the Queensland government have given enormous resources to that. In fact, $300 million to get that rolling. And now it might be a bit of pittance in relation to what we've had, but we've never had money like that. In all my time in Aboriginal affairs, I've never seen the money up front like that. You usually have to apply for grants every year or every 3 years. You know, it's a life changer, really. So there is money and resources there. You don't have to fight the government for money, although you do probably need to know where that's coming from and making the board more independent. And that's what I would say, that the board really needs to take it out of the hands of the government and run it themselves now, because that is what they were supposed to do in the first place. So that's my take on it, Cheryl.
I think you have to remember that treaty is driven by the people, grassroots people. It's not the first time we've talked about treaty. We talk about treaties for years and years. With the statement from the heart, that was a very government-driven process. 400 invited people. You know, if you go out in the community and you ask people, what's statement from the heart, they'll go, what's that? What are you talking about? Most people wouldn't even know. But I can guarantee it, if you go around Queensland, a lot of people know when you start talking about treaty. That word is spreading. And so that's what we've got to go on. You know, it's like anything. I always say to people, I'm a revolutionary. When you're in a war, you take any tool. You grab any tool that you can and you fight with it. You know, people go, oh, if you do this, you're a sellout. Oh, if you do that, you're a sellout. No. That's not how wars are won. You know, wars are won by you try anything at all. And so this is what we're going to do. We're going to have a try at making this process work. And like Sister said, we've got to take it out of the hands of government. The power is in the people, you know, all those sayings, those truisms. Power's in the people, it sure is. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think there's a huge issue that we need to be thinking about as well in Queensland. And that's about the mining that's going on. You know, how much more country can you dig up? What, you think they haven't rattled the old spirits by now? You know, they've rattled all our waterways. Our poor old Mundagari flat out got anywhere to go because of what they've done to the waterways. And you know what? I have hope. You know why I have hope? I'm not Christian. You know, I'm not an atheist. I'm not anything. I just blackfella. I believe in my spirituality and my culture. You know why I have hope? Because white fellas think they can control nature. Nature always has the last say. Always. You know, the power of this planet, the power of this country will always have the last say. Nature will have the last say. If they want to have floods, they'll give you floods. They want fire, they'll give you fire. They want to give you famine, they'll give you famine. You know, that's what it does. And so all those people who are control freaks, who think they can control everything, their days are numbered. You know, if I was a Christian, imagine the followers I'd have, eh? If I got up and started on the pulpit, eh? I don't know where to go from there.
Thank you. I just want to start by thanking the Anglican Church and the people that have organised this event, because I think, as the speakers know and have said, it's important that we talk and we share information about these things, and thank you everyone for coming along to it. I just wanted to particularly pick up on that previous question, because I think there's a point in there in that I served on the expert panel that gave that first report to Julia Gillard in 2012. It was deliberately put in the form of a book so people could read it and chapter by chapter see the sort of reasoning that was in that from the expert panel, because it's an excellent report. The reason that that didn't advance, the reason that nothing since then, a number of committees, hasn't advanced, the reason it's not advancing today is simply there is no bipartisan support for it. And that's a critical issue. It's not a fatal one. You can go ahead without bipartisan support, but it makes it very, very hard to proceed. And that's what I wanted to point out, the lack of bipartisan support, because in this nation, there's a dark heart beating. You know, there might be another heart beating, which is the one we're trying to get to support treaties, truth-telling, but there's a dark heart beating which is not about votes in the parliament or anything else like that. It's that vested interest in the way the nation is at the moment, that if Aboriginal people got back lands and territories, if Aboriginal people had a bigger say over things like mining and development that was happening, that was affecting that connection to country, and particularly if a treaty brings up an issue of compensation for the wrongdoings of the past, which is really the elephant in the room, is that, and I want to talk about, but how will our people manage to get resources in which we can continue to function with self-determination, which is our promise of self-determination. And so those vested interests, it's certain politicians who represent vested interests. It's the money that comes in from vested interests. I mean, no mining company is going to allow Aboriginal people to get a fair treaty in this whole thing. And we saw this in 1985. Bob Hawke had promised national land rights legislation. I worked on that committee drafting what was first the heritage legislation, then starting on the national land rights one. He also promised a compact. He didn't want to use the word treaty, but he said there will be a compact. All that was reneged in the space of a month because his mate Brian Burke in Western Australia was coming up to election again, and the mining companies in Western Australia were building these, putting out these advertisements of black hands building brick walls saying that land rights for Aboriginal people is apartheid. We don't want apartheid in Australia. So I just use that as an example because in our 50 years experience, what have we learned since Whitlam? That was a critical point of where we thought we had got to our goals, where it was close to a treaty. That was now 37 years ago, I think, if I've done my maths correctly. 37 years ago, out of the 50 years since Whitlam, we have splashed around in shallow water, and we haven't got any further until we've got this voice going again. And this is where truth-telling plays such a big role, because everyone has to tell the truth, and governments have to tell the truth, the vested interests have to tell the truth, and so on, and people have to realise that there is a cost that is owed to the First Peoples of Australia. And it's so important. Jackie, like myself, has been co-chair of the National Congress, the last national organisation that has been put together, and the only one that was actually designed by Aboriginal people and owned by Aboriginal people as a company. You know why it got wound up? And Jackie was serving at the time, got wound up, because the government refused to provide $5 million to National Congress to continue to function. So if we're talking about compensation, if we're talking about having justice, truth, and so on, and a government can't, it said it couldn't afford $5 million. That was the excuse. It can't afford it. We had the same thing with our bachelor agreement up in Fraser Island, where the government said, we can't afford to give you rangers to manage your land, so you can't have it. So we can't afford it is the excuse of government. Tell the truth. Tell the truth, governments. If you can't afford that, you can't afford the $1 trillion you put into COVID in this whole thing. So, and that's the problem, it's that other heart that's beating, that black heart that's beating, that will be in the shadows, won't be seen speaking up in the newspapers, but will always be holding back the Parliament and the parliamentarians about where they're going. And that's where whatever campaigns are run and whatever messages and research and reports are provided, it has to deal with that black heart that beats in this nation. Thank you.
Well, we need their grandkids to start asking their grandparents, what's your legacy? Is it, corporate money, money, money? That's all it's about. Yeah. Really.
Thanks,
That's where it's
Les.
come from. These kids
British were very good at one thing, and that was recording history. So we're able to backtrack a lot of our families and ancestors, and and there's documents that and photos as well that is so heartbreaking for anybody to see, and but we're able to go back on that truth telling. For one thing, that the British did not think that we would be able to dig up these documents because we were forbidden from having to look at it in the 90s. And it's only been, the last 20 years that we've been able to access our own records. And I even have a file on me, which I was surprised. I thought, okay, not good, so I was quite surprised by that because I was born under the Act, and I thought, and when I got all my family history, they turned around and she turned around and said, "Oh, do you want your file?" And I went, "What? What?" And she said, "Do you want your file?" And I said, "Excuse me? You got a file on me." So we all have files. So, we can go back on a lot. And actually, that's your truth-telling right there on those documents. So I think, has anybody got any other questions? I think we've gone past our time here. We've done pretty well considering. So thank you very much, everybody. I'd like to please put a round of applause for Jackie and hello, Cheryl and Jack. Oh my goodness, yeah. And also thank you, Les, for that, because I can tell you now, yeah, much appreciate that. Right now, to see that people actually pay to hear these people speak, and I feel very privileged that that they're here tonight and have Les here as well to talk. So thank you very much. And we've got coffee and cake and tea. So please, first off, I'd like to say thank you. So if there was a reason for this. There you go. So thank you so much. And if you've got more events happening that you two are going to be speaking at, I'd like to put them up and advertise them, because there's so many topics that these ladies are so skilled at in talking about First Nations peoples and our rights. So, and also for Les too. Thank you very much, and God bless everybody. Thank you.